Let her near him. She will lose a hand. The words landed flat in the middle of the intake room, loud enough for everyone to hear. Staff Sergeant Callum Briggs said it without looking up, without apology, without any particular concern for the woman who had just crouched down 3 feet from his dog. Nora Whitfield stayed exactly where she was. She had been a veterinary technician at Ridgecrest Animal Hospital in Barrie, Ontario for 6 years. She had handled 100 dogs that people called dangerous. She knew the difference between a dog that wanted to hurt someone and a dog that was hurting, and the shepherd in front of her, big, soaked in tension, ears flat against his skull, was not looking for a fight. He was looking for a way out of one. His name was Jasper. 78 pounds of Belgian Malinois mix, retired from service 14 months ago. He had a chip fracture in his left rear femur that had healed badly, a skin condition along his flank that the intake form described as stress-related, and eyes that tracked every movement in the room with the kind of vigilance that didn't switch off just because the mission was over. Nora read all of that in about 10 seconds. She didn't move closer. She just stayed low, turned her body slightly sideways, and let him look at her. I said she should step back. Briggs was talking to Dr. Harlow now, the clinic's senior veterinarian, who was standing at the counter with a tablet and the careful expression of a man choosing his battles. Nora is our lead technician, Dr. Harlow said. She'll be the one working with Jasper today. Then you need a different technician. The room had gone quiet in that particular way. Rooms go quiet when everyone is pretending they're not listening. There were 2 other staff members near the supply cabinet. Deja, who was 22 and still in school, and Marcus, who had been here longer than anyone and had seen everything. Both of them were very suddenly very interested in the floor. Briggs was not a large man in the obvious way. He wasn't the kind of big that announces itself. He was compact and still, the kind of still that comes from years of training your body not to fidget, not to signal, not to give anything away. He was 38 or 39, Nora guessed. There was a scar along the left side of his jaw that faded into his beard. He was wearing civilian clothes, dark jeans, a gray Henley, but he held himself like someone who hadn't quite finished taking off the uniform. He looked at Nora the way some men look at people they've already categorized. Quick, certain, done. She had seen that look before. It didn't especially bother her. What bothered her was Jasper. The dog was sitting beside Briggs's left leg, pressed close, but his head was turned away from his handler. That was the thing Nora kept coming back to. He wasn't looking at Briggs for reassurance. He was enduring the situation the same way Briggs was, alone, on guard, waiting for it to be over. "Mr. Briggs," she said. He looked at her. She noticed he seemed slightly surprised. She'd spoken directly to him, since most of the conversation in the room had been routed around her like she was furniture. "I'm not going to grab him or rush him or do anything sudden. I'm going to stay right here until he decides what he wants to do. That's all." A pause. "He doesn't choose," Briggs said. "He obeys." "Okay," Nora said. She said it gently, without sarcasm, and looked back at Jasper. The dog had lifted his head slightly. His nostrils were working. She could see the subtle flare of them, the way he was pulling in information from a distance he considered safe. She kept her hands loose at her sides. She was wearing lavender scrubs that she'd had since her 2nd year, soft from washing, and she smelled like the oatmeal shampoo she used on the clinic's bath time patients, because she'd been helping with a golden retriever all morning and hadn't changed yet. She didn't know if that helped. Sometimes it did. She waited. Briggs made a sound that was not quite a word, something dismissive, directed at Dr. Harlow, and began talking about the chip fracture, about what the previous vet in Petawawa had told him, about the supplements he'd already tried. His voice had authority baked into it at a cellular level. He was used to being the one with the information, the one whose assessment mattered. Nora let him talk. She was watching Jasper's ears. They had shifted, not dramatically, just a few degrees. The right one had come up slightly, rotating in her direction. It was a small thing. It was everything. She exhaled slowly, and she let her posture go even softer, even less like a threat. "He's had 3 different vets since he was transferred to me," Briggs said, somewhere behind her now. She was aware he had moved closer, probably to monitor what she was doing. None of them could get a full examination without a muzzle and two handlers, so if you think you're going to just... Jasper moved. Not toward Nora. Not away. He stood up, slowly, with the careful deliberateness of a dog who had learned that fast movements got unpredictable responses, and he took 2 steps in her direction. The leash went taut. Briggs stopped mid-sentence. Jasper looked at Nora. Not at her hands, not at the space around her. At her face. She had worked with enough dogs to know that's a specific thing. When a dog looks at your face, it means they're making a decision about you. It means they're still capable of making decisions at all. She let him look. He took another step. The leash was fully extended now, and Briggs hadn't pulled it back, which she suspected was more about shock than permission. Jasper's nose reached her first, cold and insistent against the back of her left hand, and she stayed absolutely still and let him do his work. He spent a long time there, longer than most dogs. He was thorough in the way working dogs are thorough, like he was filing a complete report. Then he did something she hadn't expected. He sat down beside her knee. Not between them, not halfway. He sat down beside Nora's left knee the way a dog sits beside someone they've decided about, and he leaned just slightly, just enough, into her leg. The room was very quiet. Nora looked up at Briggs. His face had changed. She wasn't sure how to describe it exactly. The architecture was the same. Same jaw. Same careful stillness. But something behind his eyes had shifted in a way that looked like it cost him something. He was looking at Jasper with an expression she recognized from the families of patients she'd cared for over the years. The specific grief of realizing you've missed something important about someone you love. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, he hasn't done that since. He stopped, cleared his throat. He used to do that. Before. Nora didn't ask before what. She had a sense she already knew, and she had a sense he didn't want to explain it in a room full of people. She just nodded, once, and returned her attention to Jasper. "Can I take a look at his hip?" she asked. The question was directed at Jasper as much as Briggs. Briggs passed her the leash without being asked. The examination took 40 minutes, which was longer than a standard workup but shorter than Nora had feared. Jasper was reactive to palpation around the old fracture. She felt him tense, heard the low warning sound in his throat. But he didn't snap, and he didn't try to leave. He let her manipulate the joint through its range of motion. Let her examine the skin along his flank. Let her clean the area around a small wound behind his left ear that Briggs hadn't even known was there, hidden under the fur. "How did you not see that?" Deja asked, very quietly from across the room. She was watching with her arms crossed, trying to look professional. "He doesn't let people near his head," Nora said just as quietly, "so nobody's looked recently." Briggs heard that. He was seated against the wall now, in one of the blue plastic chairs they kept for owners, and he had his elbows on his knees and was watching with an intensity that had changed quality over the course of the last half hour. It wasn't the monitoring intensity from before, the checking for incompetence intensity. It was something more like paying attention. "Will he need surgery?" he asked. "I don't think so. The fracture's healed. It's just healed a little awkwardly, and he's compensating in a way that's putting strain on the muscle above it. We can manage that with physio and some targeted exercises. I'll put together a program." She paused. The skin condition is stress. That's harder. Briggs looked at the floor. "Yeah," he said. "I know." Nora took her time finishing the documentation. She could feel that the room had breathed out. Deja had gone back to her regular tasks. Marcus had disappeared somewhere. Dr. Harlow had stopped hovering near the doorway. It was just her and Jasper and Briggs in the quiet of the examination bay, and the dog was lying on his side now, which was extraordinary. In Nora's experience, a dog as guarded as Jasper didn't lie on his side in a strange place in front of a stranger. It meant he'd decided something. "He was paired with my unit in Afghanistan," Briggs said abruptly. "Came home with me when I was discharged. That was 2 years ago." Nora wrote something down, kept her attention on the form so he'd have somewhere to look that wasn't her face. "We were fine for a while. Then I went through some things and he picked up on it. He's been different since. Reactive. Doesn't want anyone near him. She glanced up. Are you getting support? She asked. She tried to say it the same way she'd ask about a dog's diet. Matter of fact, no weight to it. He looked at her steadily. I'm working on it. Okay, she said. He used to be different, Briggs said, before all of it. He was the most social dog you'd ever seen, considering his training. He'd let kids pet him. He liked people. He paused. I think I made him like this. The way I've been. Nora put down her pen. Dogs mirror us, she said. That's not a metaphor. It's a documented physiological response. His cortisol patterns are probably matching yours. If you're wound up, he's wound up. If you're not sleeping, he knows. She hesitated. But the thing is, it goes both ways. If you start doing better, he will too. He's not broken. He's just been taking care of you the only way he knows how. Briggs looked at Jasper. Jasper's eyes were half closed, watching him the way dogs watch people they love. That soft, specific attention, the kind that doesn't ask for anything. He picked you, Briggs said. The observation came out quieter than the rest. In 15 minutes, he just picked you. He picked that I wasn't a threat, Nora said. That's different. No. Briggs shook his head slightly. I've watched him not respond to people who weren't threats. This was different. She didn't argue with him. They scheduled a follow-up for 3 weeks out. Nora walked Briggs through the exercise protocol herself, printed it, went over each step, answered his questions. She noticed he asked precise questions, the kind that meant he'd been paying close attention and actually wanted to understand rather than just comply. That told her something about him. Most people who led with authority were underneath it, just trying very hard to do things right. At the door, he stopped. I was rude when I came in, he said. He said it like he'd been holding it in for a while. You were protective, Nora said. There's a difference. He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded, just once, the way he'd said everything today, like he was being careful not to give more than was true. See you in 3 weeks, he said. Jasper looked back at her as they went through the door. She watched him go. The hitch in his gait that they'd start working on, the set of his ears that was still a little too tight, the way he stayed exactly 1 step ahead of Briggs as if he was still leading point. But when they got to the parking lot, he leaned into Briggs's leg. Briggs's hand came down and rested on the dog's head. Nora stood in the doorway for a moment after they disappeared around the corner. The October air off Georgian Bay had that particular edge to it, sharp and clean and cold enough to wake you up. She thought about what Briggs had said. He picked you. She thought about what that meant. When a dog like Jasper, trained to withstand more stress than most humans would survive, looked at someone and decided to trust them. She went back inside. There were 3 more patients waiting and a full afternoon ahead. But for a while, longer than she usually let herself, she thought about the shepherd with the careful eyes and the handler who didn't know that he was already doing the most important thing. He had walked through the door. He had shown up. He hadn't let Jasper weather it alone. That, she had learned over 6 years of this work, was usually where the real healing started. Not in the clinic. Not with her. In the parking lot on an October afternoon, a hand on a dog's head, both of them learning. Slowly, imperfectly, the only way anyone ever does, to let the war be over. I've thought a lot about the moment Jasper stood up and walked toward Nora. Not because it was dramatic. It wasn't, not really. It was 2 quiet steps across a tile floor. But I keep coming back to it because of what it meant for a dog who had stopped trusting almost everyone. Jasper didn't choose Nora because she was skilled, though she was. He didn't choose her because she said the right thing, because she didn't say much at all. He chose her because she didn't ask anything of him. She just stayed low, turned sideways, and waited. That kind of patience isn't something you perform. You either have it or you don't. And the thing about animals is they always know the difference. Briggs came through that door certain he understood the situation. He built a wall around that dog and called it protection. And I understand that impulse. I do, When you've been through something that shook you at the root, control starts to feel like the only thing keeping everything from falling apart. You hold the leash tighter. You warn people off. You mistake managing the risk for solving it. But Jasper had been carrying that same weight, matching Briggs's cortisol, mirroring his vigilance, staying on guard in a world that was supposed to be safe now. The clinic wasn't a war zone, but nobody had told his nervous system that. Because nobody around him had told their own nervous system that. What Nora did, and I think this is the part we're sitting with, wasn't just good technique. It was a kind of integrity. She saw a dog in distress, and she didn't flinch from it, didn't rush it, didn't try to shortcut her way to trust. She read the situation honestly, and she responded to what was actually there, not what was easier to deal with. And that's harder than it sounds. Most of us, when we meet resistance, either push back or retreat. She did neither. She just held her ground quietly and let the truth catch up. And then there's Briggs. He walked out of that clinic a slightly different person than he walked in, and I don't think he'd argue with that. Not because someone lectured him or proved him wrong, but because his own dog showed him something he couldn't dismiss. You can argue with people. You cannot argue with a 78-pound Malinois pressing his nose into a stranger's hand and then sitting down beside her like he'd been waiting to do that for months. That takes a certain kind of person to receive. To see your dog do something you didn't expect, something that quietly contradicts everything you've been telling yourself, and instead of defending yourself, to go quiet and pay attention. That's not weakness. That's the harder thing by far. I think about the three of them, Nora, Briggs, Jasper, and what each of them brought to that room. She brought steadiness and the willingness to see clearly. He brought the courage, eventually, to let himself be seen. And Jasper brought the only kind of honesty that doesn't know how to be anything else. We spend so much time building cases for ourselves. Reasons we're right, reasons the wall is necessary, reasons we can't afford to be open right now. And sometimes it takes something wordless. A dog stepping forward, a hand held still, a leash going slack, to remind us that healing doesn't wait for us to be ready. It just asks us to show up and stay. Briggs showed up. That mattered more than he knew.